Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Have you broken any oaths lately, Chris, that you're aware of?
Depends what you mean by lately, I guess.
Within the past, I don't know, several thousand years?
Oh, that probably in those few years, yes.
Okay. What about in the last 1,000 years?
I was up preoccupied for that time.
What about in the last 100 years?
I don't think so. I'm very careful in this lifetime not to make any.
But Chris, how can you be sure? Because there are a lot of people that ask about, being initiated in Oathbound Secrets and stuff that they just don't aware. They're not aware that they have. So it's so important for them to light a candle and do shadow work, or at least post about doing it. Do you not have lots of baggage that you need to address because you're oathbound for whatever reason, and you're obviously not fulfilling your end of some sort of contract you're unaware of?
But that's the problem, though, isn't it? I am aware of mine.
Right. Okay. So no Oathbound secrets have been revealed. Have you ever done that edging thing where you get close to it? I certainly remember the other day watching you squirm a little bit when we were talking to the map maker.
But that was less about worried that I was going to break my oaths and that I was going to cause trouble for hers.
So you were going to be worried about not breaking your oaths, but breaking someone else's oaths.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Oh, so you are basically a home wrecker then?
Somewhat.
Okay, oath breaking. So if one breaks an oath as something that they swear by to do or whatever, now there can be repercussions, but are there always repercussions? And are those repercussions, if there are they mundane repercussions or magical repercussions? Of course, the answer to that is all of the above, some of the above,
or none of the above.
Maybe none of the above, So really, we need to drill down to a very specific topic within this. So, shall we exclude the BS? I've joined a little neo-Wigan coven and they've divulged their secrets and got me to copy out their little book of shadows, and I've leaked it on the internet. Oh, a lot of mundanes hate me. Sorry, mundanes, I shouldn't say mundanes. A lot of neo-Wigans, I know it's the same thing. A lot of neo-Wigans hate me. So we'll ignore the mundane oath breaking, violation of contract, and I suppose we can stick with the magical. So betrayal of an oath, which I would distinguish as slightly different from a contract, because contracts not have clauses and such that can be, whereas oaths are a little bit more, you are tying that, I believe, to your character a lot of the time. Contracts more so, there are repercussions for breaking a contract, whereas oaths for me seem like you deduct points from your character reference. But that's my personal look at it. It might not be 100% accurate, but it's my take on it, trying to distinguish between the two of them. I don't know what you think, though.
No, I think that's quite a nice distinction, to be honest, because ultimately when it comes to a contract, its validity is always who's co-signing, who's the person that is going to be the law enforcer if said contract is broken. There is a meeting of arrangements that says this will happen if this doesn't happen by this time X, or I've offered this, so many years of this. Oaths are very different in the sense that you are, yes, like you say, it's about honor, I suppose, or strength of character, and what the damage that can be done there, I think, is a lot further and a lot more complicated when you go against something that you are programmed in terms of principle. I suppose it's, you know, you have the potential of doing damage to your actual soul, I guess, is the risky part there, because that's very much a soul contract, in my opinion. But then maybe that's a bit.
But it is potentially a contract, isn't it? So it's very much a case of kind of tying it to yourself. And I think that for me, if someone breaks a contract, I see that as that kind of mercurial, naughty, found a loophole, getting away with it, right? Whereas when I see someone break an oath, that is showing something of their character, right? So for me, contracts are normally trying to force someone or something to stick to a deal. Oaths for me are very much a case of you're swearing on your character that you will do this thing or not do this thing, or, you know, whatever it is. I swear an oath, but blah 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 blah. Which is that you aren't necessarily putting anything up as collateral. There aren't necessarily, almost like what they'd call a gentleman's agreement to a certain extent, but it's very, very serious. Wherein if you break that oath, that is your character gone. You know, it is like a virginity. When it's gone, it's gone. If you violate an oath, to me, it feels like that's it. You've put your character as collateral against this, and you've gone against it. Therefore, you have no character anymore, no honor, I suppose would be a better way to put it. But I know that that's not always the case, because people will break their oaths. Hattori Hanzo swore an oath never to make another sword, and yet he made one, didn't he, for Beatrix Kiddo to go and kill Bill in the famous film Kill Bill, in Kill Bill Volume 2. You know, breaking an oath sometimes potentially might be the right thing to do, because it depends if you're the same person as you are when you made that oath. So it's all a very, very big kind of grey area. So oaths that people might be aware of, because it's not really, I don't think, something that enters into our language nowadays. We wouldn't say, I swear an oath.
No.
What you do here is, I swear on my mother's life, or I swear on my kids' lives, and stuff like that, which you can answer me this one. I don't really understand what that means. I know people say it, but I don't really get it. So does that mean that if they swear on their kids' lives, if they violate that, I'm supposed to kill their kids? Or how does it work? What is that? Is that a magical kind of contract thing? Or I don't get it. Please explain.
In my experience of that, because I have family members who love to make that, and it really offends me, is I imagine at some point that was the traditional collateral. Believe it or not, that's a phrase I've actually never researched to find out. But because I know I'm normally on point with those things, but I actually don't know that. I don't actually know the etymology of that one. But my assumption is that collateral has been, as at some point in history, must have been exactly that. I swear on my firstborn, and that's been kind of conflated over time. I often find it offends me, because it's supposed to be trust me. If surely I wouldn't lie at that kind of risk. But the thing is, it becomes one of those flippant things that everybody's so used to saying now, that there is no bond to it. But really, I feel like actually, if we went round and killed a few kids maybe people might stop using it and take it a bit more seriously. But I don't know. We'll see.
So there's a couple of things, because I'd like to explore this a little bit and then maybe go into some of the deeper gossip and such on the Patreon, the extended edition of this here podcast. So let's take this. If you swear on your kid's life, there's nothing technically magical going to happen innately, is there? If you go back on your promise or whatever it is. But in terms of magical rights, like that whole Witcher thing, I watched this Witcher thing on Netflix, I think it is, or Amazon Prime, and there's this kind of rule of surprise and such where they're like to steal your firstborn or something. I don't really know how it works, but it struck me as quite an interesting, concept. So if someone did make that deal, would I ethically be able to just do a killing spell on their family or whatever it is they've sworn on? And that's ethically fine by your standards. Because they probably didn't mean for me to do that, but you obviously feel that there's something behind it all, So would I be in my right to go and do that? Or is that still a no-no? Should I be thinking, well, actually, they don't mean anything? So should I be trying to enforce something here, or should I not be enforcing something here? Because with a contract, of course, it's easy, because there's clauses that would normally be set by myself and other things. But with this kind of oath, it's an almost oath, I suppose, like a promise. I'm not sure where I stand with it.
Like I say, it's one of those things where it's I don't know. It feels like when kind of colloquial comments are made, like "trust me," like that's making some kind of blood oath, or invoking invoking your family's name seems like a really strange thing to do in this day and age. So I don't know. I suppose honor is a strange concept now.
Well, it's not really a concept.
Code of chivalry is long dead.
Yeah. There are still pockets in the Western world where honor is still a thing. I know people that are very big on honor and stuff like that, but it's normally part of
Minimum thieves.
Well, to a certain extent, I think that's kind of going. There's kind of gangster honor and stuff like that. There's kind of code of practice and stuff if you look at the mafia and stuff like that. But also I'm thinking honor codes within the military and stuff like that. That kind of thing is still there. But the general everyday public, I don't think, probably don't conduct themselves very honorably, but would never think that. I think that they wouldn't use the term honor because honor is kind of dead in this society that we live in nowadays.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a very strange thing that continues on. But so an oath, to make an oath, is supposed to be super serious, isn't it? But at the same time, like I kind of alluded to, people change over time, and also people kind of grow, and you could end up making an oath to do something or be something or whatever it is, and then really genuinely want to go back on it for the greater good. And you kind of think that, what's the point? Because it is a possibility for you to go back on it, but is the oath truly for another person? Like when you say, I promise, blah, 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 it's supposed to invoke a certain amount of confidence in the other person? Or is the oath really kind of like, to a certain extent, initiation process? Is it for the person that's swearing the oath? Is it how much you feel that oath in your heart, as opposed to actually what the words mean or being held accountable? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's where it kind of goes back to what you're saying about, outgrowing oaths, where something has changed in you to the point that that concept doesn't matter anymore. So, you know, if you'd like with your Kill Bill reference, the whole point of that was, I don't agree in making items of death anymore. Whereas what that comes down to in that moment is her quest, for example, is such a just one that he feels that it outranks his own oath, and therefore, you know, reneges on an oath that he's made. But that's because the the task was true. So, you know, and it's that kind of, at that point is, well, when I made this oath, it was for a specific reason. You've just changed the reason, and therefore negates my need for said oath. Doesn't make it any less of a, you know, groundbreaking decision for that person to break their oath. But it's kind of that, it's not a loophole in the same way that you would talk about when you go with, when you talk about contracts, and we consider it the contract aspect of it, because that's a loophole. That is a space that negates a hole in the agreement that has allowed you to get yourself out of it. Whereas with oath breaking, you know the risk that you are doing to break that oath. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and put my hand on the Bible or something, you know, that carries, if it's a court of law, which is where you get that kind of thing, that would carry a legal, you know, there'd be things filed against me if it was proof that I was lying, right? But that still is technically an oath. It's not a contract.
No.
Contracts are very different because, of course, there is a contract well put together, and normally it's put together for security to make sure something happens exactly as it's supposed to. Oaths seem a lot more loose, like a noose, but then can be tightened as need be. So the idea when it comes to initiations and stuff, that you swear an oath never to reveal certain secrets and that kind of thing, that means, well, we don't know currently what secrets there will be. And I'm asking you, you don't get to read the terms of the contract. You know, that's the difference. With a contract, you're supposed to know up front, where an oath generally is, well, I want you to promise something. Like when people say, promise not to judge me, or, you know, that kind of thing. Promise you won't get upset. You know, all of that sort of stuff. It's like trying to put something there to stop something in the future. Like a prenup, you know? Does a prenup mean anything? Well, no, not really. Not in a court of law. Does an oath mean anything? Well, if you attach things potentially to it, or there are consequences, maybe. But innately, I would say no. Not unless it does to you or other people. And another person is going to judge you if you break an oath. But they need to know you've broke that oath in the first place.
But that's, I think, where it gets complicated with oaths, because oaths are tied to a morality and an ethics code.
Or a very simple agreement, a very simple, I swear I will not do this. I solemnly swear I am up to no good. Is that an oath? I don't know if that's an oath. It doesn't sound like an oath, but then it kind of almost does.
Well, it is. It says that actually I shouldn't be using in that moment, it shouldn't be using magic unless you're doing something devious. And in that point, it's a case of going, actually, that's a lock on a door. And that door means I shouldn't have access to this information. So I'm automatically up to no good because I'm spying. So there's, again, it's a morality thing. Because when you put a hand on a Bible and you're swearing, in that sense, it's only oath-bound on the basis that that culture has accepted a religious
Yeah, the all-seeing eyes of Yahweh. It's like, well,
You
we
know,
won't know, but God will be your judge if you
so
like to be
that
the judge.
in that point, that is entirely about morality. There's no
Mhm.
legal ramification except for the fact to perjure oneself is to say I made a contract
Mm.
in that moment and I've broken that code of conduct. But equally, you know how difficult truth is to be is to be proven in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Because truth is such a woolly word,
Mm.
and people try and get round of it by fact. And that's another one who winds me up. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but a fact is a commonly accepted truth. So just kind of like how those two seem to negate one another, don't you think?
Mm.
Well, how do I prove it's true? And if it's commonly accepted as true, does that actually make it a fact? I don't think it does. It just means that everyone's a moron apart from me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just because we haven't proven something else is more factual. So, yes, I hate truth. I hate fact. I hate all this crap. I prefer the old method. Eye for an eye. That was a good one. It worked.
Yes. That's probably why you didn't necessarily stick to archaeology then, because that is people basically lying constantly. Presenting something as fact.
Which really, all it is a hypothesis because there's
Yeah.
no real way to
It's
prove
what
it.
I always used to say, an educated guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that there is a difference. Don't get me wrong. There's a difference between a guess and an educated guess.
Yeah.
But an educated guess still sounds dodgy. If you went to your doctor and you said, what the hell's this rash? And they'd say, it's more than likely this. You could have some kind of, you could have some kind of more than likely that. Okay, so it means that it could be a number of these things. They're all similar. Oh, you've got an infection. It's fine. We prescribe the same crap for all of that. If someone
But
says,
ultimately,
I don't know, I suppose it could be, I don't know, let's open a random page, pick that. Oh, look, you're pregnant, like Dr. Google, right? And but then there's the kind of, I am honestly going to say I'm not entirely sure, but my best guess would be this, based on this education, based on what I've seen, presenting.
Yeah. But
the
technically, both
full
of those
process.
are an educated guess.
Mm.
Both of those are an educated guess. You trust, like you do with the priest or like you do with the lawyer, you're going on their information that they have and their experience. And we as a culture trust them based on the assumption that they know what they're talking about.
But you can't trust lawyers. Their whole job revolves around basically trying to get away with manipulating truth.
No, but the in that instance, it's how much do I pay to make sure I'm not screwed over?
Oh,
Do you know
yes,
what I mean?
definitely.
That's how a lawyer works.
Particularly in America, I'm told it's just a case of how much you can afford. Depends on how much time or not time you do or don't do.
Yeah.
Interesting concept. The law and justice and such. Do you think justice and truth would be good friends?
Not in my experience.
No. Explain your thought process why justice and truth wouldn't be good friends.
Well, justice is tied by morality.
Yeah.
Truth should be neutral.
Truth should be neutral, is just saying how it is, right?
Yeah.
But justice, in order to be truly just, needs truth. And that generally doesn't happen. So a lot of the time, when people do these magical spells and stuff like that, I love the legal. I've got involved with quite a lot of magical legal cases and such in the past with clients and stuff. And a lot of people go for justice. They say, I want justice. And I say, whose justice do you want? No, I want to evoke the greater power that is justice. And I'm like, yes, which one of them do you want? Because like
Yeah.
a high court justice, or a high court judge, Supreme Court justice, I think they have over in the US, don't they? Or a high court judge or something over here. Each of them are slightly different. They're individuals at the end of the day. And yes, they still have a code in which to go by, but still there's a little bit of leeway to a certain extent. And with justice and things like that, very often, if people are willing to have truth first, then that sheds the light on the whole situation, which is not often not what people actually want. They want to win, don't they?
No.
Like,
and you've got to factor in that what do you consider to be ultimately just? Because actually, if morality gets mixed into that, and you go for kind of religious justice, that's a whole different kettle of fish altogether. Because then that is governed by who decides what is morally right or wrong. It gets somewhat less messier in a secular system, but it's just a different set of biases. This is when it which is why it gets tricky with things like abortion and things like that get so tricky. Because once you start to mix morality into it and ethics, it's based on, well, whose ethics are you basing this on? Because to most gods, none of us matter. So let's, obviously can't speak for myself because I'm very, very important. But, at the end of the day, you're depending on which court you're testing everybody by. But this is part of the problem when you start to talk about right and wrong is it's right and wrong by whose set of rules, whose set of ethics. And you are assuming that the same set of ethics applies to deities or to titans or to the universe. At the end of the day, why would the earth ever side with us, the virus that is humanity? Because it doesn't play by the rules as everybody else in the animal kingdom, so why should it care what we do?
Because people think that if they tie enough plastic ribbons around the tree, they'll win the favor.
Yes. But that's the other part, isn't it? It's down to favor. A lot of what modern practice is, which is the crux of a lot of it, is that it's a bribery situation.
Yeah.
We're not talking about who deserves what. We're talking about who could bribe the most, who's got the best mates, in whatever battle that you're fighting at that point, which is ultimately how probably a lot of justice systems work. Let's face it, because there is always a consequence. I keep hearing, I don't know if it's on the radio or if it might be Spotify, maybe, where I keep getting these adverts to become a magistrate.
Oh, okay.
You don't need to have any legal experience. You just have to have a good idea of what
upstanding
is
character.
fair.
You need to be a pillar of the local community, like me.
What is fair, and have empathy. And the example they always give is this person was trying to break in somewhere. The person who owned that space got injured. It was his first offence, and he is the breadwinner at home, that the income of his earning is based upon. And that's the example they give in the advert.
I'd send Katie Price to prison. I don't know about you, but I would. Right, that is it for this first section of the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. If you want to hear the full episode today, you need to get yourself on the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon.